The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory,
tear down this foundation.
Civil rights advocates are urging the United States Department of Justice to condemn the insular cases. We'll go one-on-one with local attorney Pamela Colon, chair of the first USVI Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, for insights on this crucial movement.
Unanimously approved.
The Virgin Islands Casino Control Commission recently approved an initial casino license for VIGL operations, a key component in reviving horse racing on the Big Island. We'll have the details.
Tony Rea brings to this role a wealth of experience.
Experienced Virgin Islands defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Gordon Rea is Governor Albert Bryan Jr.'s pick for the next Attorney General. We'll have more. Plus,
I am declaring a local state of emergency to restore energy security in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
From a local state of emergency to an emergency legislative session, the governor and lawmakers took immediate action this past week to address the financial crisis facing WAPA that culminated recently in rolling blackouts on St. Croix. We'll have the details. And later, this week's panel joins the conversation to analyze these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Leslie Kamisiang. We begin with a detailed look at recent advocacy efforts to overturn the insular cases, decisions that have shaped the rights of millions living in U.S. territories, including the Virgin Islands, for over a century. Here's more.
In 2024, no one should use the racist languages from the insular cases to deny citizenship rights to people born in U.S. territories.
Virgin Islands delegate to Congress Stacey Plaskett joined civil rights groups and allies at a press conference outside the Capitol recently to urge the U.S. Department of Justice to officially denounce the insular cases. These are a series of Supreme Court decisions from the early 1900s that have historically described residents of U.S. territories as alien races and half-civilized to legitimize unequal treatment. Plaskett and other members of Congress, including more than 40 House representatives and senators, issued a letter on April 15th to Attorney General Merrick Garland criticizing the Department of Justice's defense of the insular cases. They argue that adhering to these rulings undermines the democratic principles of the United States by denying territorial residents a voice in their government.
We are all calling on the Justice Department to not just turn, but to rip the page on the insular cases. Tear down this foundation. Tear it down.
Pamela Colon, chair of the first Virgin Islands Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, recently presented the committee's inaugural report detailing civil rights implications of the legal and political status of the Virgin Islands.
The committee found that this system is in actuality a system of apartheid that the United States has imposed on its territories, despite us being the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Joining the show from our St. Croix studio is attorney Pamela Colon, who, as you just saw, has been at the forefront of advocating for civil rights and equality for residents of the Virgin Islands. Welcome to Comes with the Territory, Attorney Colon. You recently spoke at the press conference outside the Capitol calling for the denouncement of the insular cases. Why is this an important issue for the residents of the Virgin Islands?
I did come to the press conference at the Capitol. I spoke at that press conference, and I have to let you know I'm speaking here tonight in my individual capacity, although I am the chairperson of the United States Advisory Committee, U.S. Virgin Islands Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. The reason the insular cases are so antagonistic to civil rights in the Virgin Islands and in all the territories is because they are race-based, and they created a legal fiction called the unincorporated territory. And everything that has occurred both politically and legally in all of the US territories since those cases came into existence about 107, actually longer than that, 120 years ago, has used that as a foundation to why it is permissible to treat us as second-class citizens in the territories.
We're going to get to that created fiction that you just spoke about, because that is actually one of the most fascinating parts of the 9 cases that took place that are grouped together as the insular cases. But let's talk about the objectives of the letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland criticizing the Department of Justice's defense of the insular cases. And we know that it's not been just under this Department of Justice, but also the Obama Department of Justice, where they have adamantly defended the results of the insular cases.
That's very true. It seems to be a bipartisan issue that no one wants to denounce the insular cases, and it is vital that that occurs. So we were extremely encouraged by the participation of so many senators and congressperson in signing on to this letter, requesting that the United States Department of Justice finally denounce these cases as a basis for their arguments when they make presentations before the United States Supreme Court in support of issues affecting the civil rights of persons living in the territories. These cases, now, to be sure, just because the Department of Justice denounces the cases doesn't mean that there will be an automatic effective change in either the relationship between the United States and its territories or the civil rights of those living in the territories. But it is a first step, and it's an important step because we cannot seem to get past every administration for the last 20 years at least, still relying on these race-based cases in their arguments before the Supreme Court in the very important cases that affect our rights here in the Virgin Islands.
Well, let's talk about the racism that is inherent, the language that is inherent in some of the rulings. We were called alien races, half-civilized individuals from Supreme Court justices, which is amazing to believe, but we know what the history of this country is. You would almost think in 2024, there would be shame by our government to continue to perpetuate the law that is involved. And like you just mentioned, the fictional incorporated versus unincorporated territorial statuses that were created as a result of these rulings. Why do you think that the United States continues to perpetuate this legalized colonialism?
That is such an interesting question, and I've given that a lot of thought in my personal capacity. I believe that it's likely that the federal government wishes to continue control over the territories without interference from the territories. And I can give you examples for instance, the military installations that are in Guam, or what happened in Vieques in Puerto Rico. If the territories had more say controlling their own sovereign land, as they would if they were a state, for example, it would be much more difficult for the United States federal government to come in and just impose their will with regard to things like military installations, which is not to say that they're not necessary or not important parts of the entire United States, but nonetheless, the territories really have no say. For instance, in Guam, I believe 40% of Guam is now occupied by United States military installations.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, they do consider themselves the tip of the spear there, but nonetheless, even here in the Virgin Islands, as you know, back in the World War II, there was a submarine base in St. Thomas, and it was vital. But I believe that in part that's why the United States wishes to continue to control these territories without giving us a measure of self-determination.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that because we have been offered the opportunity to self-determine with political referendum, and we have these choices that have been put before us. I believe the last one was in the early 1990s here in the territory. I think 1992 to be exact. And we didn't have very high participation. Puerto Rico, our neighboring territory, has had several of these referenda, and they have not come down with a solid choice as a territory in terms of what direction. It's almost split a third, and a third between independent statehood and maintaining their Commonwealth status. And in reality, the incorporated status has only been given to two generations, or unincorporated, excuse me, status has only been given to two entities, Hawaii and Alaska, that have been admitted to the United States. When you look at the future of political status for the Virgin Islands, do we really have the ability to choose the direction that we want to go in politically as a territory?
Well, let me start by saying that 1992 is the year I moved to the Virgin Islands. I've been a Virgin Islands resident and citizen for 32 years now. And the very first thing I did was register to vote. And I actually participated in that referendum. And you are correct. I believe only 29% of the registered voters or eligible voters voted in that referendum. And therefore it could not move forward because at least 50% was required. And it was at that same time that I learned, to my shock and amazement, that by simply moving to US soil, I had lost my right to vote for president and to have any sort of voting representation in the US Congress. So that's a really pivotal point for me. I will tell you that the committee has addressed, the advisory committee has addressed some of these issues in our report.
Mm-hmm.
And we look to the United Nations Charter, which requires the United States, who listed the United States Virgin Islands as a non-self-governing entity or territory. The Charter of the UN requires that the United States bring the United States Virgin Islands to full measurement of self-government. I do agree with you. That's a challenging thing to do. And one of the things that the committee has recommended to the United States Commission on Civil Rights is that there be an effort to educate those within the territory, those within the United States Virgin Islands who would be eligible to make a decision on such a referendum with regard to what our political status is with the United States, what the relationship is, and what the possible choices of status could be, and the ramifications, both political, social, and economic, of each of those choices would be. The committee itself did not delve into what would be the best selection, but what we have asked is that we be provided with, from the Interior Department and Insular Affairs Division, the opportunity to educate those here in the Virgin Islands so that we can make a self-governance determination that is based on knowledge and information and not simply based on beliefs that have no basis in fact or in law. And my understanding is there is a bill currently being formatted in the United States Virgin Islands legislature for another referendum in 2027. Mm-hmm. And I was very happy to hear about that. And I would love for the educational component that the committee requested from the US Commission on Civil Rights to coincide with mm-hmm. that referendum.
Moving to your role as chair of the First Virgin Islands Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, let's talk about the aims of the advisory committee. What are the primary goals that the committee is trying to achieve?
Okay, so to give you a little bit of background, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights was created in 1957. It issued its first report in 1959. At that time, there were 51 what they call state advisory committees to the commission that accounted for all 50 states and the District of Columbia. It was not until 2021 where Senator Hirono sponsored legislation, she was a co-sponsor, that permitted and required, actually more than permitted, but required that there be advisory committees to the commission from each of the territories, each mm-hmm. of the 5 territories. And at that time, that legislation was passed, and there was extra funding permitted to the commission so that the establishment and support of the committees could occur. So these committees are brand new. The committee appointments were made in July of 2022, and we have a 4-year term. And so we are about a year and a half into our first term, almost 2 years in. The establishment of these committees is to report back to the United States Commission on Civil Rights about civil rights issues in our particular jurisdiction, of course, here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it is our mission to advise the Commission on civil rights issues that are in the territory so that the Commission can then forward their findings onto Congress, and congressional action and other agency actions can be taken so that these issues can be addressed. And so we are truly an advisory committee. That's what we do. That's what our role is. We are requested to make findings and recommendations, and we have done that in our first report, and we intend to continue to do so in our future reports.
Tell us about some of the major findings and recommendations that you've had in your first inaugural report.
Sure. The committees are permitted to select what topic they wish to discuss. And our committee had decided, there were many issues that we could have brought forward, as everyone who's lived here or was born and raised here is aware of. There are voting rights issues. There are the insular cases, of course. There are civil rights issues with regard to the environmental problems that are here in the territory. There's civil rights issues with regard to clean water, access to clean water. But our committee decided that we needed to take a 30,000-foot overview so that we could put into context what the actual status of civil rights in the Virgin Islands is currently, and that could only be truly appreciated if you had a historical background and an understanding of how we came to where we are now. And we did arrive at a number of findings, a number of key conclusions, and a number of recommendations. We had the ability to learn from 4 very, very qualified and persons in high regard in their expertise who spoke to us in briefings to the committee, and based on what they relayed to us and how we became informed through their presentations, we determined the following findings. First, the lack of self-determination of American citizens living in the United States Virgin Islands raises constitutional, international, and human rights concerns. Second, the international law requirements as mandated by the United Nations treaties requires the United States, as I said earlier, to bring the United States Virgin Islands to full measure of self-government. Third, the 3 political solutions are A, independence, B, incorporation, and C, free association. The general population of the United States may lack awareness of the political status of the U.S. citizens living in the Virgin Islands. Sometimes they don't even realize we are U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And finally, the Department of the Interior has an obligation to inform the citizens of the United States Virgin Islands of the options available and their role within the framework of the United States political system. And that's what I was referring to before. We seek to enhance and, create and enhance an educational system here in the Virgin Islands so that citizens living here, born here, raised here, having generations of family here, understand exactly what our relationship is with the United States and also what our potential options are. Excuse me. We also, based on those findings, came to a number of key conclusions, 3, and these were the primary focus of the report. First, that citizens in the U.S. Virgin Islands lack the self-determination and equality protections guaranteed by the United States Constitution that other United States citizens enjoy. In essence, we're a second-class citizen.
Yes.
We are a second-tier citizenship.
Yep.
The international law requirements, as I stated earlier, as mandated by the United Nations Treaty, requires that the United States bring to full measure of self-government the United States Virgin Islands. And 3, more broadly, the millions, there's 3.6 million people living in the territories combined.
Yes.
The millions of United States citizens living in the territories share the following. None can vote for president. None are represented by voting members of Congress. None can effectively participate in self-determination at any level of government, including local level, and each has a lower status of citizenship compared to the citizens living in the 50 states.
Let me ask you this, because we only have 2 minutes left, believe it or not. What is next for the May meeting of the advisory committee, very briefly?
We are scheduling our next meeting, hopefully the week of May 20th. These meetings are open to the public. They are posted on the Federal Register. We encourage the public to come and listen. There is time for questions and comments from the public at the end of our business meeting. And this particular meeting, I will just be coming back to report on the reception I received from the commission, which was very positive. And we will be discussing what steps we will take next and what topics we will pursue next. Personally, now this is just my opinion as one individual member of the committee, I would like to see us work collectively with the Virgin Islands legislature on the referendum so that we can get programs in place that will help to educate everybody so that we, moving forward, can make appropriate decisions that are knowledge-based about our status and our civil rights.
And I appreciate the work that you're doing. This work and work on political status, my senior thesis in college was all about political status. So this is when I became enamored with the insular cases and our status as a territory and self-determination. So thank you and the committee for all that you're doing. Up next, we'll hear from this week's panel. But first, let's look at the topics up for discussion.
We look forward to the day when we can hear the words, "Riders up," and they're off and running at the Doc James racetrack.
That vision is one step closer to reality following the Casino Control Commission's recent unanimous approval of a 1-year initial casino license for VIGL operations. The license enables VIGL to begin constructing a new casino at the Randall Doc James racetrack, a key component to bringing horse racing back to the Big Island.
This is a very happy day for all of us. So thank you very much.
A license to operate a casino known as a Racino was the last item VIGL needed to begin building a 15,000 square foot casino with a bar and restaurant, as well as off-track betting at the St. Croix horse track. Since the Racino will serve as the primary revenue source to sustain racing operations, the success of the entire $20 million racetrack project hinged on the Casino Control Commission's approval of the Racino license. Approval came after an exhaustive 8-month vetting process by the Casino Control Commission and its consultants, including thorough background checks and interviews with VIGL's associates, according to the Casino Control Commission's chairman, Marvin Pickering, who emphasized the rigorous nature of the investigations.
This is no small feat. This is not akin to a credit card application wherein the application is submitted and a credit score check is done, and voila, a license is issued within hours. It is much more intense, and more importantly, this type of intense vetting is required by law.
With the vetting process behind them and the initial casino license secured, VIGL's Andrew Dubuque said he is prepared to start construction once he receives a resolution from the Casino Control Commission detailing requirements. He said he expects the first horse races to coincide with the casino's completion, aiming to finish within a year.
It is with great pleasure and confidence that I nominate Attorney Gordon Rea to serve as the next Attorney General of the United States Virgin Islands.
At an April 22nd press conference announcing his nomination as the next Attorney General, Gordon Rea said he was made for the job.
I've got quite a background in prosecution, in civil matters, in appellate matters, and so I feel like I was almost made for this job. And I also have a deep love for the Virgin Islands. I was first here in 1968 on St. Croix with the U.S. Peace Corps.
Gordon Rea started his legal career defending complex criminal cases in Los Angeles, then worked as a special assistant to the chief counsel of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Activities in Washington, D.C. He later prosecuted hundreds of criminal cases as an assistant U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., and subsequently took on the role of assistant U.S. attorney in the Virgin Islands, where he prosecuted major felonies.
Attorney Rea brings to this role a wealth of experience and a proven record of service and legal acumen that is simply unparalleled.
Brian's nomination of Rea follows the resignation of Attorney General Ariel Smith on March 15th after 8 months in the role. Smith was appointed after Brian terminated Attorney General Denise George in December 2022, shortly after the DOJ sued J.P. Morgan Chase amid investigations related to Jeffrey Epstein. Although the two previous attorneys generals left their roles under Brian, Rea told WTJX that he has not discussed their departures with the governor. Rea said he is comfortable working with Brian and is looking forward to the job.
I'm looking forward to helping hone the Justice Department and making it a department that will be doing exactly what the Virgin Islands wants and needs. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. Sir.
The time for talk is over and the time for action is imminent.
Governor Brian took action at another April 22nd press conference by declaring a local state of emergency.
To restore energy security in the U.S. Virgin Islands, resolve the past due payments of government instrumentalities to WAPA, and rectify the current conditions that have resulted in rotational outages and lost generating capacity.
Brian said WAPA's recent rolling blackouts on St. Croix happened because Agreco, the company that leases generators to WAPA, shut the agency off due to non-payment.
It's unconscionable that we have the power off in St. Croix because the bill for the Agrecos have not been paid. And the bill for Agrecos have not been paid because the government agencies are not paying their bills. I couldn't allow it to happen.
Brian highlighted 3 semi-autonomous agencies that had consistently accumulated bills with the utility.
As of this week, those same 3 entities, JFL, Schneider Regional, and Waste Management, owe WAPA over $11 million. They are once again racking up a considerable outstanding obligation to WAPA without any meaningful conversation about how they will address these bills.
The governor's state of emergency declaration enabled him to bypass the Senate's appropriation process and directly access the Budget Stabilization Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund, to pay Agreco. He said he was making a next day payment of $2.3 million and taking other steps as well.
I want to take immediate steps to ensure that the obligations of the Schneider Regional, JFL Hospital, and Waste Management Authority are once again paid in full, thereby providing WAPA with much-needed cash liquidity and going forward, keeping the entire government current on its utility bills owed to WAPA. This isn't a subsidy. This is now about paying our bills in a timely fashion.
At a press conference the next day, lawmakers criticized the governor for excluding them from the process.
We have to pump the brakes on the governor and the disrespect that the governor is showing to this branch of government.
Any decision to pay WAPA using general funds of the people of the Virgin Islands should be a part of the legislative process.
On the Analyze This radio show Wednesday morning, the governor responded by outlining the Virgin Islands Code as the legal basis for his actions.
The code says clearly, the governor of the Virgin Islands, whether threat of emergency or under emergency or disaster, may use all resources of may declare an emergency, may declare martial law, and may use all available resources. It's right there in the code. Further, once the state of emergency is declared, I could use any fund in the government of the Virgin Islands. Governor of the Virgin Islands is the most powerful governor in the country because of the powers vested in him by the Organic Act of 1964 and further explained...
54, yeah.
54.
Yeah.
And further explained in the code, Title 23 under emergencies.
During a day-long emergency meeting of the Senate Committee on Budget, Appropriations, and Finance on Wednesday, senators pressed WAPA officials for updates on the agency's financial crisis. The CEO of WAPA cited high fuel costs and unpaid bills and financial shortages as the reasons for rotating outages, which ultimately led to the governor declaring a state of emergency. However, Senate Majority Leader Kenneth Gittens challenged this explanation and leveled a serious accusation against WAPA and the Bryan administration.
If you are not convinced, I am, that these two entities are working in collusion with each other. Not only that, WAPA alert update. St. Croix, the rotational outages have ended on St. Croix due to successful repairs of Unit 20. This is extortion, people. You got your check today, and all of a sudden, the rotation is over.
This emergency legislative session of the 35th Legislature of the Virgin Islands is hereby called to order.
During a legislative session on Thursday, April 25th, lawmakers passed 3 bills related to WAPA's financial crisis. A bill that will allow the government to offset a $6 million loan made to WAPA with obligations owed by the hospitals and Waste Management Authority to WAPA. A bill that permits the government to use the Budget Stabilization Fund to cover its obligations to WAPA for part of fiscal year 2024, with the requirement to replenish these funds by October 31st, 2024, with fiscal year 2024 collections. And a bill that amends the Virgin Islands Code to allow the legislature by 2/3 vote to rescind a state of emergency.
We recognize what a state of emergency is, and we have to make sure that it stays along those lines.
Joining the show to delve right into this hot button issue is Hugo Hodge Jr., former CEO of WAPA and current chairman of the St. Thomas St. John Horse Racing Commission. Welcome back to the show, Hugo. And joining the panel discussion from St. Croix is attorney Anthony Couture, owner of the Couture Law Firm, and former Senator Neville James, who now hosts the popular radio show Analyze This on WTJX's FM station 93.1. Thank you both for being here. Neville, let's start with you. You hosted the governor on this issue that is on the minds of Virgin Islanders across the territory and had a tough role to play in balancing, the needs of the branch that you came from and that you adamantly said that you are obligated to defend, and balancing what the governor decided to do and the acrimony that's happening before the two branches. Tell us a little bit about what you took away from that interview.
Leslie, interviewing the governor is always a pleasure. The governor is good with a microphone. He came in this week wanting to take it to the legislature.
Yeah.
And he did that. I had to let you know to take it easy sometime. Because, at the end of the day, the public wants these two important branches, the executive branch and the legislative branch, to work together on behalf of them for a Virgin Islands that is going well. They don't really want to hear about the disputes. It's unfortunate what we're dealing with the WAPA situation. I consistently bring up what we went through back in 2008. I want Hugo Hodge to know that I got the data right here. To let them know that when things were bad, there were times when WAPA has petitioned the PSC for increases in the LEAC. And 2008 was actually the most volatile year, where in May of 2008, then CEO Hodge petitioned the PSC for an increase. And then in October and November of that year, he petitioned for 2 decreases because the price of fuel had gone down 18% and 34%, respectively. So this topic is nothing new. We need a permanent fix. It's hard, but we gotta make that commitment and we gotta make it happen because we can't continue to go through this predicament over and over again. I understand the governor's position because he has that ability to declare a state of emergency, but I also understand the legislature's position because they are the authorizing branch of the government of the Virgin Islands, in particular when it comes to spending expenditures of public funds.
I'm going to come back to you, Neville. Let me come to you, Mr. Hodge. You have sat in this seat, so you know exactly, very intimately, probably better than most Virgin Islanders, what is happening with the authority. What do you think about the legislature's response? It almost seems like they thought the governor overreached and ignored them. And the governor is saying, listen, I have a crisis, I have to solve a crisis, and the Virgin Islands Code gives me the authority to act and act immediately. What do you take away from this situation?
The crisis is real, and it was real, particularly in the days leading up to this decision by the governor. When you hear a press release that talks about weather and low fuel, then you're talking about days of fuel on hand. And when you get to a certain level of fuel in the tanks, you can't even get the pumps to bring the fuel out. And you don't normally play with less than 4, 5, 6 days. The system was designed to have 20 to 28 days of fuel on hand and more as you get toward the hurricane season. When you get single digits, then it allows for a delivery to be disrupted by weather wherever the delivery is coming from to impact what's going on here in the territory. And those who can least afford to pay their bill are the most vulnerable when you get to these types of scenarios, because they don't have generators, they don't have any way of getting power to their homes in the event that the utility runs out of power. And the signal that sends to the rest of the markets of what's going on here in this territory impacts everyone, the central government, the businesses,
everybody.
I mean, just the press release going out saying that rotating is going to take place makes businesses make tough decisions and close their doors. Businesses that may be on their last lifeline as far as how they're going to operate. They can't afford to have a day without revenue or 2 days without revenue, but they also can't afford to be open and paying employees and can't function. So they're making decisions to close their doors and whatnot. It's a crisis that had to be averted as soon as possible in any manner available. So while I get the reaction from the legislature, I think I heard the governor say that he came to, or he called the Senate president, and he tried to get action from them, and he had to get signatures, 8 signatures, I guess, for a majority to move forward, and it wasn't happening fast enough, so he decided to go this route. So I get the impression that he did attempt to go through the legislature or through the process, but experience is necessary under these crises.
Attorney Couture, the legislature responded by passing on the 25th 3 bills. One essentially reduces a loan that the hospitals and waste management got. It deducts the amount that they're paying back. The second allows the government of the Virgin Islands to utilize the rainy day fund, which I think already is given in the governor's emergency powers. But the third is the most interesting. It requires a 2/3 vote from the legislature to rescind a state of emergency by the governor. As an attorney, legally, what do you think about those?
I haven't read the bill, but based on what you indicated, it's the governor has, as the governor, he has the authority to enact a state of emergency. As Mr. Hodge and Mr. James said, we're in a crisis now with WAPA. Matter of fact, we have been in a crisis with WAPA for many years. I am pushing 60, and from a teenager or elementary up to now, we also had problem issues with WAPA. You know, WAPA is the backbone of the VA economy. It affects business, it affects the residents. For example, if someone has medical needs and they need power to run the oxygen, the oxygen, or to keep the medication cool or refrigerated, and WAPA goes with this constant rotating power. You know, it affects us all. So I will say that the governor was maybe he did try, as Mr. Hyde said, to contact to involve the Senate. However, he had to make a decision, and the decision was to do a state of emergency.
Do you think that the passing of these bills that took place, do you think that was an overreach or overshot based on how they felt about what the governor did?
Well, I just think it was a reaction. Whether or not it's an overreach, I know it's a reaction because the governor did take some shots towards the legislature earlier this week, and the governor stated on Analyze This that this has been a 4-month deal ordeal that he's been having with the legislature. He said he reached out to them from back in December, and for some reason it isn't panning out. He said that WAPA came down to the legislature. I believe it was in March. I think it was the 25th. I'm not sure what the date was. And he said it got acrimonious. He didn't like how the legislature was going after WAPA. The legislature wanted the financial team and the lead financial members of the governor's cabinet to come down to the legislature. Unfortunately, they said they weren't coming. So I believe the legislature reacted. They're human beings like the governor. But unlike the governor, the buck stops with the governor. And the governor has to make that decision. He's the chief executive, and he didn't want the worst case scenario to be realized. So he tapped into Title 23, the Rainy Day Fund, the Budget Stabilization Act, and he made a payment. Hopefully going forward, we could have cooler heads could prevail, but there's also a political dynamic that I mentioned to the governor. The governor, you were the one that labeled yourself a lame duck after you won re-election in 2022. The senators have a contract call in 2024.
Absolutely.
Their situation is much more political and politically impacted than your situation is right now.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Hodge. Being at the head of WAPA, you probably have reviewed the improvement plans. You have probably improved the plans that they have moving forward. I think most Virgin Islanders want to know, when do we see the light at the end of the tunnel? When do we get there? Do you think the authority has the capability of finally getting us to a point where we have stable power production and at a cost that will allow the economy to thrive?
Absolutely. I mean, never before in the history of the authority has there been subsidy from the government.
Never.
Some $96 million received from the government with no tie to a bill, no tie to future payments, no tie to a pilot, just straight $96 million cash infusion over a 2-year process. There's $3 or $4 billion or maybe more available in federal funds, accessible by the Water and Power Authority. Never before has there been this level of funding available to improve the facilities, the infrastructure, hardening, just overall upgrades to the system, generation, you name it, all aspects of the business. So if ever there is a time that the authority could be streamlined and made efficient and made resilient to handle the needs of the territory, it's now. I've never seen it with this kind of a war chest before. It's been historically the land of high expectation and low resources.
Very interesting point. VIGL just recently got approved for a 1-year temporary racino license. And I'm going to come to you first, Attorney Couture. What do you think that is going to happen now? Do you think that the action, the movement that Crucians have been waiting for is going to take place? They said they're going to get on building this casino right away, which essentially will lead to horse racing, which is what I think the people of St. Croix want to see more than anything on the island. But I'm curious as to how gaming has been attached to racing in both districts now. It almost seems like in order for horse racing to succeed, it has to be attached to the funding source. And the funding source now is clearly gaming in the territory.
Correct. With this new, with the announcement of the Racino, the approval of the license by the Casino Commission, I see a revenue source for the VI, not just St. Croix, the VI. I also the Virgin as a whole, because one benefit, the other benefit, the other islands benefit. So we look forward to the construction, the completion of the Racino, the completion of the racetrack, which is long time done. It has been waiting for a long time. And those looking forward to it. But as I said before, this will be a revenue stream, and it'll be helpful to the Virgin Islands government and the residents.
Neville, same point. Gaming is essential almost now. It's here. There's a gaming facility that's going to be at the Clinton Phipps racetrack. Now this one is going to finally get built at the Randall Doc James racetrack, and we hopefully will see the racing that residents wants to see. Do you think this is a sustainable model for the future? And what's the overall feeling? I know you're a man with your ear to the ground. What's the overall feeling on the island of St. Croix right now?
The overall feeling is we want horse races back. You know,
Yeah.
we've been down since Maria slammed into us on September 20th, 2017. You know, the track, it's a personal thing for me. You know, the
Of
track
course.
bears my dad's name.
That's right.
So hopefully, you know, we could get it back to where we need it to be. But I know Hugo Hodge likes numbers. I know that you like numbers, Leslie. I know Attorney Couture is a businessman, so he got dealt with numbers. And I know the public likes numbers. In 2012, right, when the Racino was operating here on St. Croix, right, with 30 machines at the racetrack, the revenue done at the racetrack for calendar year 2012 was $4.8 million.
Wow.
At the casino at the time, with 300 machines, the revenues up at the casino was $14.4 million. So when you reconcile those numbers with 10% of the machines that existed at the casino done at the racetrack, they were doing 33% of the revenue. So the access to the racetrack is much more greater. It's in a South Central location here on St. Croix. So I'm not concerned about them generating revenue. The real issue is about management. It's about constructing a facility, and it's about the regulatory obligations that come with being a horse racing commission member. Mr. Hodge can speak to that on the St. Thomas St. John side. We had a VI commission. We've broken it back to how it was before, with St. Croix having a commission, St. Thomas and St. John having commission, and from time to time we can have a joint commission. So we'll see how that pans out. Good news for St. Croix. Now we need to see delivery.
Hugo, you are the chairman of the St. Thomas St. John Horse Racing Commission. So this is another issue right up your alley. You have seen what has taken place and overseen the progress at the Clinton Phipps racetrack on St. Thomas. And there's an excitement. Carnival races are right around the corner. You know, there's been a major push to try to get the demand back. Tell us a little bit about what that process has been like and what you hope to see for the island of St. Croix as well.
This is actually the second time that I was involved in the planning of carnival races since I've been on the commission and since being chairman. The first one was right before COVID. We were planning to do carnival races. It was after the hurricanes. We were getting back. VIGL was the partner here on St. Thomas, and a very good partner at that time.
Good.
At that time, Mr. Lance Griffith was running the helm, and we had made plans. We were getting ready to do carnival races, and boom, COVID came and knocked everything down. So it put a big damper on things, and from then it's been just this thirst to get back to horse racing. I'm seeing a different approach between the two districts. Here on St. Thomas, you see Southland Gaming is building every facility first except the entertainment center, which is synonymous with the Racino on St. Croix.
Yeah.
Right? And they're building everything prior to that. So we're going to get horse racing for Carnival.
First before gaming,
And you'll get gaming afterwards.
Yeah.
On St. Croix, you're seeing VIGL say they're going to build a Racino first, as that's the funding source. That's how it's going to get funded. And then they're going to build the facilities afterwards, or maybe simultaneously you'll get some construction going on. Either way, it's a passion for a lot of the Virgin Islands. So I really look forward to seeing horse racing come back territorially.
Let me ask you one quick question. What are lessons that you've learned going through this experience in rebuilding the Clinton Phipps racetrack that you think would be valuable for the Randall Doc James racetrack on St. Croix?
I think you have to use the knowledge base that exists territorially. There's the district thinking and the concept of isolating districts is not one that gets the best results in this territory. In my opinion, the most challenging thing we have in front of us in this territory are economies of scale. no matter what we have as a problem, whether it's you think it's healthcare, you think it's WAPA, you think it's regulation or whatever, economy of scale plays a role in how we deal with all of them. We seem to want to exacerbate that more by separating. We need to come together, utilize the skill set in all over this territory, reach every corner, every crevice, and get everyone to play a role in how we move forward. We have to go ahead and call Syncourt for a few things during this process, and we continue to do so. And that needs to take place. And so I'm not a proponent of separating and segregation and isolation, but we need to unify and make sure we get all resources, everybody, all hands on deck as we move forward.
We have a new Attorney General nominee in the territory, and this is the third one for this administration. Let me start with you first, Attorney Couture, because this is, again, right up your lane. It comes with the territory, being an attorney. How do you feel about the naming of Gordon Rea? Have you had any working experience with Attorney Rea before? And do you think he is a good appointee by Governor Bryan?
First, I will say, yes, I think he's he's a good appointee. If you look in the encyclopedia or dictionary for a prototype of an attorney or attorney general, you see Gordon Rea. Gordon Rea has a wealth of experience. He's well-rounded. One thing important we should say, he loves the Virgin Islands. First, he came in 1968. And then he came back in 81. He has served in different capacities. He has been in work for the U.S. Attorney Office. He has worked in private. And in reference to my personal experience with Mr. Rea, I was in a case where opposing counsels. And first it was like, oh, this is the Gordon Rea, like you're intimidated. But Gordon Rea, he's someone who's very respectful, and he listens to even the opponent. And I think that's something that's needed in a leader. As the leader and as Department of Justice, he will set the tone for his other attorneys. And I think it's a good choice Governor Bryan did in selecting Attorney Rea as the new AG.
Neville, we know that there has been philosophical disagreements stated as reasons for the departure of prior attorney generals. This is this one position in the cabinet that even with the administration before, we just seem to be having turnover. Based on your knowledge of Attorney Rea, do you think that he is a good choice by the governor? And what do you think he will bring different to the office?
Well, I think so, simply because he knows the landscape. He's been here for an extended amount of time. He was in 1968. That's 46 years. You know what I'm saying? That's a long time. You know what I'm saying? So, but I wish him well. He is taking this position under very cloudy times right now. We've been involved in this protracted issue with the Epstein scandal. I think we're actually subjects of a lawsuit right now. So his experience is going to be valuable, and hopefully it works out for him. I want, right, and I know Hugo Hadj is going to like this one, right? I don't think, right, that the public is going to go after Gordon Rea, and that won't be indicative of primitive behavior. That's a term that Hugo liked to use back in the day, right? Because we are in the Virgin Islands. We're a very, receptive people, and we're willing to give you a chance. And I think Gordon Rea deserves that opportunity. The governor has made a decision. The legislature, they have the nomination to deal with because he was officially nominated and set down. So they got that adoption responsibility to see if they will approve his nomination, and we'll see going forward. But I wish him well, and I wish the Virgin Islands well. That's what we're about, and that's why we're all here tonight because it comes with the territory.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Hadj. Do you have any intimate experience or work with Attorney Rea at all?
Not directly, but I observed him in a couple of cases that he's had here. I've met him before. My father has worked alongside him in some cases, and he's someone that if I was to need an attorney, he'd be one of the first names of who I would look for.
That's a high
based on what I've
compliment.
heard. And so I've been hearing comments like, wow, that's a great catch.
Mhm.
How do we entice him to want to do this? So it's definitely something. This would be one of those things. My good friend Neville James said that we have to go through the confirmation process, and I'd be interested to see if someone finds something negative about this through that process.
That's a good point. Yeah. Let me come back to you, Attorney Couture. What do you think, given the history and the cloud that Neville mentioned that Attorney Ray is coming to serve under, given the history of the past two attorney generals, their tenure and how they ended? What do you think the main priority should be for Attorney Ray coming into the office?
Well, first, the office is understaffed. So one would be to recruit and also to retain and to train and to lead and to process the cases, some of the cases forward. And as I said before, Mr. Ray, Attorney Ray, he has a history, he has experience, he has the knowledge to handle this job and to do it well, and it will be beneficial to the VI.
Let me come to you with a similar question as well, Neville. I mean, you just mentioned the Epstein case, this protracted, never-ending, seemingly legal battle that the territory is in. But there are other legal concerns. There's been case logs that have been backed up, people with cases that they've been able to prosecute. What do you think the crucial cornerstones of his administration of the Justice Department should be?
Well, first of all, you want buy-in from the deputy attorney generals. That's number one. They're going through some turmoil because here's what we're looking at, and you mentioned it, in the lead-in. We've had a attorney general change late December, early January 2022, 2023. We've had an attorney general change in March of this year. We've had interim attorney generals as well. So, we got our work cut out for us. But we need buy-in from our deputy attorney generals, and we need to bring the Epstein cases to closure. That's the most important thing. We need to get that behind us. We're in the middle of a recovery, and Hugo can speak to this. This recoveries last anywhere from 12 to 15, maybe 18 years. Katrina is a perfect example of that. What happened down in New Orleans back in 2005, and they just came to some type of closure beginning like 2020. So, that's what we need to focus on. And I am concerned, based on what Attorney Couture said, that the Department of Justice is understaffed. We need to fill those vacancies. We need those lawyers in there, but we need to get through the advice and consent process with the legislature. Hopefully that runs smooth, and we can get leadership at the Department of Justice. Attorney
Couture, Neville, Mr. Hodge, thank you all for coming on and making this such a fantastic panel. That's all the show we have for you today. For your news updates, tune into WTJX's newsfeed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Leslie Camis Young for all of us here at WTJX Channel 12. Take care.